I can crash here. It's very rare for the game to crash here, though. If it crashes, it's usually right there. I see. So it's been nearly 3 years since I speedran this weird little game called Family Guy the video game. Back then were simpler times. The world record before I began running this game was 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 18 seconds by Coconut Drake. After studying his run and doing my own research with the game, I managed to drop this time down by nearly 20 minutes to 1 hour, 46 minutes, and 43 seconds by optimizing the route and eliminating mistakes made in his run. After achieving this time, I knew that a sub 143, or even a sub 140 might be possible, but I was already getting tired of running the game and did everything that I had set out to do, so I posted my typical speedrun highlight video, and that was that. A few weeks after posting this video, I received an interesting comment from a user named Megatoner, who claimed to have labbed the game in the past and had found several out-of-bounds glitches. At the time, out-of-bounds glitches in this game were extremely uncommon. There was only one feature to my run, so this claim that there were several out there that I didn't know about seemed unlikely. I mean, I looked all over YouTube and video sharing sites for glitches and talked with the albeit extremely small speedrun community and came out empty-handed. But hey, this type of stuff happens all the time. People come to my comment section claiming they can beat my speedruns and know about every secret glitch in existence. Yeah, sure. This isn't even me saying my speedruns are all that amazing, that they can't be beaten. But you sort of have to walk the walk before you can talk the talk. But I decided to entertain this notion that this game was actually super glitchy, and that there were several out-of-bounds glitches just waiting to be used in runs. So I linked him to the Family Guy Discord. Little did I know that by inviting Megatoner to this Discord would begin a brand new era of Family Guy speedrunning. Since my speedrun, over 75 new skips and strategies were discovered and implemented into the route, and other speedrunners who were inspired to speedrun the game after watching my runs were getting exceptionally good at running this game. At first, the world record was being traded rapidly back and forth by Cerberus and Chloe. Cerberus's final leaderboard time would be a 1:28:37 before moving on to other projects, which is nearly 20 minutes faster than my time. However, Chloe decided to keep running the game, and she managed to get her time down to a 1:15:26, an unbelievable 31 minutes faster than my time. But no, the community wasn't finished here, not even close. Toxic Pinhead, a top runner of several other licensed games like the Simpsons video game, Futurama, Barely Odd Parents, and many others started running and riding this game and took it to a level I didn't even think was possible. By the time the dust settled, the final time Toxic would lead the leaderboards with was a 1:08:08, nearly 40 minutes faster than my old run. So what exactly happened? What could the community have possibly found to make this massive disparity between my runs and the runs that came afterwards? Well, in today's video, I'm going to give you guys a full insight into what it takes to run a game like this and go over all the new strats. I really hope you all enjoy. So who initially got me interested in coming back into the game wasn't Cerberus, Chloe, or Toxic. If you guys remember, the last game I was speedrunning before this was the Simpsons Hit and Run. So whenever I had the chance, I would watch the world record holder Liquid Wi-Fi stream, hoping to learn some new strategies. But interestingly enough, he decided to pick up Family Guy himself. So I started watching those runs as well, and that's when I first started learning about all of the new strats. Liquid ran the game for like 1 to 2 weeks and managed to get a 1:12:49. And since I would never be able to touch his hit and run time in a million years, I decided to make it my goal to beat his run however long it would take me. Let's see how I do. But before we get into the game, first I gotta talk about balls. That's right, today's video sponsor is Manscaped. Listen fellas, let's be real. Not every partner we have is gonna be named Jane Porter, so it just can't be looking like Tarzan down there. That's why today I'd like to tell you all about the Platinum Package 4.0. This kit comes with a weed whacker, ear and nose hair trimmer, shampoo, conditioner, body wash, and deodorant, not just for the pits, but also for downstairs too. All of these products are great, but I especially appreciate the Lawnmower 4.0, the electric and waterproof razor. Before Manscaped came along, I looked like this. But now after using their products, I look like this. And thanks to the skin-safe technology of the lawnmower, I got rid of all of my body hair, not leaving even a single scratch. By going to manscaped.com/easyspeedruns or entering the code EZSpeedruns at checkout, you can get 20% off their products and free shipping. Again, my code is EZSpeedruns. Make sure you guys go check out Manscaped. The link will be in the description and pinned comment. Thanks again to them for sponsoring me. Now let's get back to the video. So in this game, we get to play as Peter, Brian, and Stewie, who each have their own unique levels and storylines going on. For 5 days without sleeping, Peter has been in the garage watching a non-stop Mr. Belvedere marathon, which is an American sitcom from the 1980s. Meanwhile, inside the house, Stewie has completed his mind control ray and plans to amplify its signal to mind control the entire world by using the satellite dish on top of the house. Just before doing so, Stewie looks out the window to find Bertram outside with henchmen and a helicopter taking control of the satellite dish. So the first objective is to get Stewie onto the roof to see exactly what he's up to. Starting in Stewie's bedroom, we'll need to collect 19 bolts scattered upstairs to progress. Bolts are used to upgrade Stewie's ray gun, so even if we were able to skip this room, it wouldn't be worth it because we'd skip the first upgrade, which is arguably the most important upgrade because it doubles the power of each shot and allows for a charge shot that shoots 3 bullets at once. After entering the living room, I'll jump on the couch and then attempt to precisely time a double jump to clip through the wall and skip the animation of Stewie putting on his mind control helmet. After clipping, I like to do a really high jump to glide around the cutscene triggers and get Stewie trapped between the door and the microwave. Because Stewie's head is so big, I'm basically able to use it to clip him through the wall and hit the load trigger to go outside. Next, I'll jump off this car, walk off it to the point Stewie is suspended in air, and then do a double jump and glide. When glides are performed like this, it puts Stewie in a weird state, that when he gets shot, instead of falling, he stands in the air. While in this state, it is possible to airwalk and even perform more jumps and glides to continue stacking additional height. I'll use this to skip most of the outside portion and land straight onto the roof. There is another way to do this, which I didn't learn until after this run, that if you double jump into a bullet, this weird float will happen, giving you a bunch of height, which can then be glided out of to get onto the roof a little bit quicker. So yeah, we're only 1 minute into this game, and you can already see how broken it is, and it's only going to get crazier from here. So once we got onto the roof, Stewie destroys the satellite dish to prevent Bertram from using it. But this was really Bertram's plan all along, to stop Stewie from using it. But then he blows up the dish with a rocket from his helicopter, which kind of defeats the purpose of the first part, but the satellite dish lands on Peter, sending him to the hospital. Knowing Bertram is plotting something, Stewie decides the best case of action is to infiltrate his lair in Peter's testicles. Because, you know, they're brothers or whatever. For the most part, I'm just going to stick to the plot of this game and not get too deep into Family Guy lore, so just assume anything weird in this game probably has some reference from an earlier episode attached to it. Anyways, the objective now is to locate Peter at the hospital and enter his body. Since Stewie's blaster has been upgraded with 20 bolts we got earlier, we're able to take out all of the male nurses in the hospital with only 1 shot, and we also have access to the charge shot to shoot 3 bolts at once. For most rooms in the hospital, all the nurses need to be taken out in order to progress. Upon entering the second room, I'll clear out some of the nurses and then shoot a bullet to take out the machine controlling the lasers. While the bullet is traveling, I'll go through the options menu to turn autosave off and then back on again to create a new save file while also keeping my old one so I can access this hospital room later on for some shenanigans. I'll continue making my way through the hospital, clearing rooms and collecting bolts along the way. I'll need to collect at least 200 bolts by the time I get to Peter's bladder, but of course that's still a long way from where we're at. Upon entering a maternity ward, I'll do a wall clip in this room to clear it quickly. But holding the left trigger, it's possible to strafe with Stewie, allowing me to move while maintaining the angle Stewie is facing. By turning Stewie slightly right, holding up and gliding, I can clip through this wall and skip the section. I'll continue making my way through the hospital until I reach the MRI room. While Stewie is putting on the mind control helmet, I'll create one more save file to access the MRI room for later on. Then I'll move Quagmire close to Loretta, allowing me to clip behind and grab the MRI coil. Exiting through the door concludes the first Stewie section. Now we're on to Brian. For Brian's part of the story, he's framed by Carter Pewterschmidt for impregnating his dog Seabreeze and bribes the police to arrest him. Brian gets led through the jail by Joe, but hilariously, somebody installed a speed bump by the jail cells, allowing Brian to get free. The Brian segments are all about him collecting evidence to figure out who the actual culprit is to prove his innocence. But in order to do that, we first need to escape the jail. But here's the thing. We're not actually going to play the Brian sections as Brian. Not just for this level, but for the entire game. By abusing a character swap glitch, I'm able to trick the game into letting me play as Stewie instead. I do this by loading either the Hospital Ricochet or MRI Room save files, killing Stewie as quickly as I can, and then reload the save file of the location I want to play as Stewie. After pressing A to load the selected file, I can press B to cancel the load from happening, which overwrites the current checkpoint. So when the game asks me to go to the last checkpoint, it instead takes me to the overwritten checkpoint as whichever character I'm playing as. The reason we have both Hospital Ricochet and MRI Room save files is because for some reason using the Hospital Ricochet for character swaps crashes in certain levels, but the MRI Room will always work. So we'll use the hospital save in levels that don't crash, since the hospital is way quicker for killing Stewie, and then use the MRI Room for any levels that would normally crash. Anyways, while I was explaining all of this, you can see Stewie making an absolute joke out of the jail level. This is because the Brian levels are supposed to be stealth missions, so bringing in Stewie, who has a jump, glide, and much faster movement speed, makes the levels a cakewalk. Even in situations where Stewie gets caught by someone, he's usually moving so fast, he can make it to the exit before getting sent back. This discovery saves quite a bit of time in the speedrun, but believe it or not, there are some even bigger discoveries later on that save even more. Upon finishing the jail, we're back at the hospital with Stewie. The liposuction machines have broken down and spilt fat all over the ground, so we have to go through some of the next sections, sliding around in the fat to collect the parts to repair the machine. While I finish this task, I'd like to explain a couple more mechanics about Stewie. Stewie moves faster in the air compared to walking. Not by much, but it definitely is noticeable. So in this run, I try to jump and glide in as many places as possible. But one thing I didn't account for was a brief period of time that Stewie lands on the ground, he moves slower. So it seems like whether you glide for movement or walk is merely down to preference, as they seem about equal in terms of speed. Although there is the PAL version of this game, which is 50 Hz instead of 60. Like many games from this generation, when they're converted from 50 Hz to 60, it adjusts movement by something like 16%, which in this game's case, ended up making all the characters move 16% faster. You know, give or take. NTSC is still the most accessible version for most people, so it is a default category listed on the leaderboards, but I figured I'd point this out. After repairing the liposuction machine, I'll make my way down to the hallway and enter the morgue. Even in my old speedruns, this out of bounds trick where you use this clown to push Stewie out of bounds and cheese the puzzle was known. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is the only out of bounds strat I even used back then. But there is this really weird clip you can do on one of the lockers that if you jump into it before the tray comes out, it will warp you straight to the end. I stopped doing this trick in my runs because I was constantly killing solid pace attempts, but if it is pulled off quickly, first try, it can save roughly 7 seconds over doing the clown strat. After this room, there's a Galaga-esque shooting section where we have to take out these nurses as quickly as possible. Not much to say here other than the fastest way to go about it is to kill all the nurses before they reach the exit, otherwise you'll have to wait before finishing them off, but that's pretty obvious. Afterwards, we'll head into the room where Peter is being held, but he's surrounded by nurses. In order to get to him, we'll turn off the life support for a nearby patron to summon death, use a mind control ray to take over him, and then kill the nurses each one by one. Each time I kill a nurse, I'm going to exit death, and then once the death dialogue ends, use the ray to take control again. This will make death say,
"Damn, I hate these last minute additions,"
which skips the dialogue he'd normally have when killing the nurses, which is much longer. Then I'll have a sexy party cutaway, and that's pretty much it for the section. There is a way to skip the sexy party cutaway by clipping out of bounds. Anytime a character is too far out of range for the cutaways, the game will just skip them entirely, which you can see Toxic do in his run. I never managed to get this clip down, so I didn't do it in mine, but for completing the cutaway, I do get 10 free bolts for the collection. After completing the section, Stewie will shrink down and enter Peter. Shortly afterwards, Peter will wake up, only having recollection of him watching Mr. Belvedere and getting hit on the head. He notices outside his window a light with a silhouette of Belvedere, and deduces that Belvedere must have been the one who put him in the hospital and kidnapped his family. So we head to the streets of Quahog to track down Belvedere. Oh, and he also thinks everyone in the town is a brainwashed henchman for Belvedere, which are why the Peter sections are arcade-style beat-em-ups, where he pretty much just beats the shit out of everyone. Upon starting the Peter section, I'll kick the nearby old lady and lead her close to the hospital. Once close enough, I'll do a dropkick between her and the invisible wall to get out of bounds. One important aspect to getting out of bounds as Peter is to move far enough away that the camera focuses on Peter. Otherwise, if we continue on, we just won't be able to see. Now, I could do this by moving backwards until the camera pans in, but what I do in my run is head over to this roadblock, which if jumped on, will shoot Peter way up into the air. I'm not exactly sure why this happens when jumping on certain objects, but the height we get from this is enough to allow the camera to lock onto Peter. The rest of this level is pretty much just maneuvering around invisible walls and hitting the inbound triggers to continue loading the level until we get to the end. Upon reaching the end of this section, we'll have a fight versus a guy in a clam costume. For this fight, I'll position Peter close to the buildings in the back, facing away from the camera, and repeatedly using dropkicks for damage. Being positioned here will help make it so the clam doesn't move around as much after getting hit. It would be faster to do this fight with Peter's spin attack, but because I did this level while being out of bounds, I skipped collecting the power-up. But luckily by the time we get to the next Peter section, it gets auto-unlocked. Following the cutaway gag, we have another Brian section, which in other words means we have another Stewie section. This segment is pretty straightforward, just collect the evidence and don't get caught. And with using Stewie, makes the segment only a little over a minute long. Then we're back to Stewie's section in Peter's stomach. If I jump and glide right after entering the level, I can glide for a short period before I reach a stomach acid. Once I cross the pit, I'll need to take out 2 of these cells to open the door. Next I'll have another sliding section, and I'll just want to get through here quickly while picking up as many extra bolts as I can manage. After this, we'll then be in the lungs. The lungs start out with a cutaway gag, and right after it, I'm going to need to maintain good movement to complete this section on cycle. Basically, the lungs will have periods of updrafts and downdrafts. I want to use these cycles to my advantage to tread through quickly. Another mechanic unique to Stewie is that his double jump also allows him to clip onto platforms if he jumps underneath them, which is something that will definitely come into play later. I somewhat butchered the ending of this section, missing the 10 bolts and then going back for them, but I really wanted these because in my previous run I didn't grab them and ended up not having enough by the end. Next I'll head through another sliding section. If I head through the left path, there will be this whirlpool, which you're obviously meant to avoid, but if I slide into the edge of it, I'll be able to cancel the sliding state and stand for a brief period of time to then jump onto the platforms, hitting the trigger to open the door really quickly. I'll then head into the brain. In this room, a bunch of Loises will spawn, and after shooting them, they'll break down into even more versions of Lois. This section can be really tough because you'll normally never enter with full health, and whether you get any health drops or not is dependent on luck. The main strategy is to hit the green shirt Loises as quickly as possible since they will try to grab Stewie, and then try to lead the rest into the electric force fields. Since the lower tier Loises have projectiles, a lot of them will hit each other if they're clumped together. I ended up getting unlucky with health drops and needed to collect some extra health, losing a bit of time, but this wasn't the end of the world. After finishing off the last Lois, an audio cue will trigger, and I'll damage abuse to the top section and head to the last area of the level. In this area, we need to change the blood flow of the brain from the stomach to the testicles. To do this, I'll do this very odd segment of moving all 3 of these characters to the end zone, turning them into attractive women, or in Cleveland's case, put him into a tutu, changing the blood flow. I'll then head into the testicles, and the level will be completed. Next we'll have another Peter level. To do this one quickly, I'll head over to this tree, punch it 3 times, and then dropkick the wall. This will do the final hit on the tree to drop a refrigerator, and because of Peter's displaced hitbox during the dropkick, will allow me to clip out of bounds. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that Peter seems to move quicker when jumping diagonally, so anytime I need to move closer or away from the camera, this is what I'll usually do. But yeah, this out of bounds trick actually skips so much, and I think this is probably the most broken trick in the run. Normally we'd have to do this entire section in the soccer field and have several sections where I need to fight enemies, but these all get cheesed by the out of bounds trick. But the best part about this trick is that we get to skip the porta potty cutaway. This used to be my least favorite part about the run because you'd have to do this quick time event where you'd follow the button press pattern, playing Mary Has a Little Lamb with farts. But not only was this slow as hell, the buttons wouldn't buffer very well for it, so attempting to do it fast would often end in tragedy, as I would accidentally fail the segment, making me restart it from scratch. Anyways, there is one drawback to doing this out of bounds trick. Obviously, normally you're supposed to go through each area, beating all enemies in order to progress. But because I never fight any of the enemies, they all stay loaded in until the next chunk of the level loads in. But upon reaching this particular trigger, it's pretty common for the game to crash during the transition because I believe for only a moment, everything is loaded in at once just before the previous area is unloaded, which can make the game crash. I mean, just in general, this game is very unstable and can crash at pretty much any moment. I ended up finding a setup for the section, and I'll let my live commentary take it from here.
So we're gonna run up here to the porta body load, which I'm hitting all the load triggers for right now. When we hit this, we're gonna take a very sharp 3 jumps down so that Peter's head is in line with the sidewalk. This red house is where the load screens are at. So I'm gonna avoid loading the NPCs around it and walk into the manhole cover till we get about here. And yeah.
For the end of the Peter section, I want to collect as much food as possible to fill up his snack meter because the spin move is super broken and beats all enemies in one hit. If I ever ran this game again, I'd probably focus even more on getting snack meter up because with a full bar, you can use a spin move twice, beating the clam in only 2 attacks. Anyways, following the cutaway gag, we'll be back to another Brian level as Stewie. We arrive at the news station to look for evidence that Tom Tucker is the one responsible for impregnating Seabreeze based on a hunch by Brian. Normally in this level, you're supposed to avoid all the scattered fire hydrants and security guards, grab a cheerleading outfit, and make your way into the news station. But as Stewie, we can just jump around the fence and hit the trigger right away, skipping all of it. Once inside, I'll need to collect tapes in order to progress through each section. Once in the final room, there will be this conveyor belt with a bunch of traps that will kill in one hit. I ended up being slightly off cycle here and had to freestyle the whole thing, but luckily I got through unscathed. Right after opening the trap to take out the villain, a cutaway gag will play, but this can actually be skipped with some very precise inputs you can see Toxic Pinhead doing here. The Brian cutaway gags don't really provide much benefit because he doesn't have any power-ups, so anytime we're able to skip his are really good. Meanwhile, Peter is still following the Mr. Belvedere head flying in the sky, and it leads him to Cheesy Charlie's. A family leaving the restaurant ends up hitting Peter in the head with the door on the way out. Compounded with his lack of sleep and earlier injuries, he of course instantly wakes up as Rufus Griffin and heads into Cheesy Charlie's to beat up some children. Listen, I just work here. I don't really know what's going on. All I know is I need to go fast. So upon entering, I'll kick the nearby children to lure the mom over by these ropes. Then with a precisely positioned dropkick, I'll be able to clip out of bounds and run around the entire level, finishing off the final group of patrons with a spin attack. At this point, we finally learned a new technique with Peter, where he charges into people. This allows him to move at a much faster pace, but it uses a lot of snack meter, so when using it against enemies, I'll opt for spamming the button for it to preserve some of the meter and do a lot of damage quickly. Once finishing this section, Peter will find a closed off area for employees only. Assuming it's another one of Belvedere's tricks, he enters it and falls into a distorted evil version of Cheesy Charlie's. I was really confused about the evil Cheesy Charlie section, so I looked into it, and apparently this is a reference from Season 1, Episode 3, when Peter loses a reservation for Stewie's birthday party and lies to Lois, telling her the place is evil. And there's this 1 minute cutaway of Peter describing the place of malnourished children and torture devices. Just seemed like a weird reference to use for a whole level, but does it really matter? I'm just gonna skip the whole thing anyways. Right after spawning in, if I go to this torture device, break it, and then do this weird spin slide move that Peter has, I can clip through the wall and go straight to the end of the level. This works out perfectly, since just before getting to Evil Cheesy Charlie's, I had to do a cutaway as Peter, giving me a near full snack meter. After running to the end of the section, I have to fight an Evil Moose and Evil Winnie the Pooh, which are both taken out easily with Peter's spin move. As I make my way towards the end of the section, I'll take out the manager of Cheesy Charlie's, and after doing so, the floor will begin to break apart, revealing this lava pit with floating Belvedere heads. To take out the green heads quickly, I'll just walk into them, and they'll automatically explode. Once the red and purple heads begin to spawn in, I'll instead use the charge move to blow them up to prevent them from grabbing Peter. After destroying the final head, I'll be locked into place, and a giant Belvedere head will come floating towards Peter to swallow him. Even though I'm locked out of movement, I made sure to face towards the giant head after finishing the final target, and I can use some of Peter's combos to inch him slightly closer to Belvedere, saving a little bit of time. It's then revealed to us that Peter is just in a supply closet, and was hallucinating the entire time. And after throwing around some of the equipment, he knocks himself out again. After waking up, he looks out the window to see another Belvedere in the sky, this time at a Native American casino, which will be the location of the next Peter level. But while this was all going on, Stewie is continuing on his journey through Peter's body, heading into another lung. While in this lung, there's a clip I can do with this mailbox to skip some of the platforming section to fly straight to the lower section, skipping about half the area. After treading through another sliding section, I'll then be in the bladder. I'm not exactly sure what happened to my double jump here because Stewie just plummets straight to the ground. Normally I just airwalk across the entire area from the start, but I had to do a backup here instead. Not a big deal, but this does force me to wait for this platform to spawn to pick up the health, losing a bit of time. Upon reaching the end of the bladder, a sperm will notice Stewie and begin fleeing to alert the rest of the colony, so I have to race and beat him to the end of the sliding section. It's important that I hit every speed boost here because even missing one might make it so I don't get there in time, but especially since I still didn't have 200 bolts, so I needed to grab this extra 10 pickup along the way, making this race even more strict. The 200 upgrade is important here because this unlocks a grenade power-up, which saves a lot of time in the testicles. The testicles is a notoriously difficult section for speedrunners and casual players alike. This is another Galaga themed level, with hordes of sperm cells spawning as targets, with all 5 waves needing to be completed before moving on. The problem is there are mines scattered across the floor that trigger anytime you get too close to them. These explode extremely quickly, do tons of damage, and even if you try to avoid one, the mines can blow up other mines and still get you because they're placed so closely together. I remember being stuck on this forever during my casual playthrough. Luckily, there are some strats for these waves, but things can get messy pretty quickly, and once I get towards the end, it becomes entirely freestyle. Toxic Pinhead did eventually come up with some setups for these later waves, but at the time I didn't know about them, which made this section all the more stressful. I ended up playing this super safe because I was already on pretty decent pace and just wanted to maintain it. Upon leaving, my health took a pretty bad toll, so I didn't have a lot of confidence heading into the next section. But hey, maybe I could clutch it out.
If this goes through one try, this is amazing. Okay, not help. No. Okay, I give up.
No, I could not. However, my second attempt with full HP would finally allow me to get through. If I do one shot on this machine, I can drop the lasers while keeping the machine intact and use it to jump over this glass to set up an airwalk. And then simply just fly to the end of the level.
Nope.
Okay, yeah. I really just could not catch a break in the testicles here. I feel like if I ever ran this game again, the thing I'd work on most are the airwalk strategies, because some of the things that are possible from using them are incredible, just like what you're seeing in Toxic's run. But I can't overstate how difficult these strats are to pull off. He just makes it look super easy. But just wait until we get into some of the later sections. It gets even crazier. Upon reaching the end of the testicles, Stewie finds Bertram's notes with the location of his current base. Following this, we have another Brian level played as Stewie, continuing to traverse to the TV station for evidence that Tom Tucker impregnated Seabreeze. Since I'm playing as Stewie, I don't need to grab the bush disguise and can instead navigate through the set, which is really difficult to do because I have to stay perfectly on cycle and not mess up movement the slightest bit or I will get caught. It's pretty much the same deal with the next section where I need to stay on cycle so I can get the tape in front of this worker as he's looking at his clipboard. To do this, I also need to glide at exactly a 45-degree angle, which gives a massive speed boost to Stewie's speed, which you can see me do here. After collecting the third tape, I'll lock into the nearby worker and head towards this red table, which will allow me to clip out of bounds to skip a cutscene, and then I can head straight towards the door to the dressing rooms. After entering the dressing rooms, I'll have to set up the character swap glitch again to play as Stewie, and then continue collecting the tapes till I reach the exit. This part is extremely difficult because positioning is so important, and if I stay in front of any of these people for too long, I will definitely get caught. Towards the end of the section, I can do a glide with Stewie to clip through the wall, grab the final tape, and that marks the end of this level. After rifling through Tom Tucker's underwear drawer, Brian realizes the scent doesn't match. He looks over to the newspaper on the nearby table and gets his next lead to look for evidence at the dog racetrack. Meanwhile, Peter has finally arrived at the casino. Just as he's about to enter, a hooker attempting suicide lands on Peter, once again giving him a head injury. So of course, Peter now takes the form of a hooker and heads inside. This is one of the levels where we actually just play the game as intended. Well, you know, for the most part. The key strategy here is to walk into the triggers for the workers, and then either bump into the people playing the slots, or just destroy their casino game altogether so they'll follow along. Since the old people die in one hit, I'll usually just take them out along the way. Then once I've gathered as many people as I can before being blocked off, I'll do a spin attack and take them all out at once. After doing so, I'll want to pick up as much food for the snack meter as I can so I can keep rinse and repeating the strategy. Also, another strat for the Peter levels that I've yet to mention is that by jumping just as the go arrow pops up on screen, skips the animation that normally plays, saving a second or two each time, which definitely does add up. As I make my way through, I'll approach an elevator and I'll want to hit the two enemies that come out of it right away because otherwise they'll continue spawning even more enemies. I'll then drag the rest of them down, do a spin move, and take out the remainder gamblers. After heading into the elevator, I'll have the section where I have waves of enemies and falling spears to deal with. There's no randomness with where the enemies spawn, so I know exactly where they'll be when they fall down. When it comes to the melee enemies, I'll almost always want to spin them because if I charge, they'll get knocked down and I have to waste time finishing them off to proceed. But for the tomahawk and card throwers, I'll charge into them since they won't get knocked down. However, this is subject to change depending on how much snack meter I have because whatever I have when leaving the section is what I'll have to work with in the next part. Oh, and if you were wondering how Stewie escapes out of Peter's body, anyways, for the next part of the Peter level, we just have to crash a redneck wedding. For some reason, a lot of the enemies didn't follow me when they were all clumped together, but yeah, it's just a basic section of needing to beat all the enemies as quickly as possible, and after finishing it will be another Stewie level. After reading Bertram's book, Stewie manages to find Bertram's lair, so this will be the location for the next Stewie level. Normally there's a bunch of stuff we have to do to distract the guard standing outside, or we could just do a double jump and glide right through the gate. Although this does skip Stewie taking off the mind control ray helmet, so I have to death abuse in the next area to remove it. In this next section, I get to fly in this hovercraft, and I need to destroy the enemies and turrets that spawn to get through each hall until I get to the end. There are 2 extremely advanced strats that can be done here, neither of which I use, but I will cover them anyways just because I think they're super cool. The first is of course an airwalk. I'm pretty sure I've already covered this, but once an airwalk is initiated, you can continue getting infinite height until enemy bullets will no longer reach Stewie. Toxic shoots enough of the enemies to trigger the turret to give him some starting height, and then jumps over the barrier, hitting it on the other side for a damage boost. He then glides out of it and gets shot by a bullet to continue airwalking. You might be wondering, what if the bullet misses? Great question. The trick won't work, and you'll just die. Luckily, there are multiple opportunities to get shot, but also getting shot too much can cancel jumps, and yeah, the whole trick is just so stressful to do so deep into a run. Weirdly enough, enemies for the second wave will spawn even if the first wave is skipped, so this gives Toxic a good opportunity to stack height and walk all the way to the end, saving approximately 40 seconds. The other strat for this level is to use the first turret that spawns to push the hovercraft through the barrier instead. If this is done, you can simply fly straight to the end with none of the other waves spawning. But here's the thing about this strat. I've never even hit it in practice, and I don't believe Toxic has either. The only person to have ever pulled this off on console is Chloe, and she somehow even managed to do it in a run, which is unbelievable. I'm pretty sure this version of the skip saves around 1 minute. Anyways, after I make my way through this section with my suboptimal strats, I'll head into the next room. Normally you're supposed to blow up all these things and then... Okay, listen, I don't even remember anymore, because all we do now is fly into this broken glass, clip through the wall, and hit the loading trigger from out of bounds. There's a really cool trick in the next section where I drop down this lift, jump on the other lift nearby, break this object, hit the switch for the giant door from underneath the platform, head back out, jump back on the lift just before it gets too high, and then hit the trigger for the door to open, all while avoiding the cutaway trigger. I don't know, it's just precise little things like this that are super intense and make this game really fun to speedrun. The next room I head into is a maze. At this point we need to have 300 bolts before heading into the next room. The thing is, we don't even bother routing these bolts in, since there are containers of 50 bolts scattered all across this room, and since we already have over 200, we only need to grab 2 of the crates. This will give the penetrating shot upgrade to defeat the armored enemies in the next room. I'll approach the second box here and not destroy it, but instead jump in between it and the wall to clip out of bounds, cheesing the entire maze. I didn't know about this, but apparently you can just jump off the box into the barrier and skip the puzzle that way, which is pretty cool as well. Either way, we'll then head into the nursery. In here there are a bunch of armed toddlers, and I'll need to kill all of them. For a long time it was thought that we needed to kill these guys super quickly in order to go faster, which meant adopting riskier strategies to get through quicker. Some of the enemies here can be quite deadly, especially the ones that shoot these massive gas clouds. These have huge hitboxes, lower health rapidly, and also slow movement, which can make them difficult to escape out of. The thing is, after using dev tools to view the game from out of bounds, Toxic discovered that the final toddler spawns on a set timer, so as long as you clear the room before it spawns, no time will be lost. That's why at the end of this mission, I stand here shooting bombs at the wall to hit it from out of bounds. But in hindsight, it's probably just better to keep spamming shots at the door while standing closer to the exit. Following this, we're back at the casino with Peter, but this time, I'm actually going to be using a couple of glitches. After entering the level, I'm going to aggro a bunch of enemies, and then walk towards the camera. By doing my typical dropkick shenanigans, I'll be able to clip through the wall. Unfortunately, this wasn't going as planned, and I took a ton of damage. And I had no snack meter. The card throwers in the next section do an insane amount of damage. This was going to be close.
Genocide and stuff.
Wait. Can I clutch it? Can we clutch God? Jesus Christ. No. Fuck. This guy. Okay, no. Hold on. Oh!
Ah, you bastard! Oh, crap!
Hold on. I need this. Throw him into him. Hit. Oh my. That was insane. Actually insane.
Heading into the next section, I just need to clear a bunch of enemies and then do a hot dog eating contest with Gandhi. After winning the contest, I'll be awarded with a new ability called Food Frenzy and another bar on the snack meter. I'll then head into another elevator section. This is pretty simple since now I have full HP and full snack meter. Just after defeating this card thrower, there'll be a cutaway gag, and if I input the combo for Food Frenzy just before it plays, a weird glitch will occur where the Food Frenzy ball is permanently just flying around the room. I still have control over it, but I have full control over Peter at the same time. Unfortunately, this trick does seem to lose time since it knocks out a lot of enemies without actually killing them. Anyways, in this next section, I'll just have to beat up a bunch of enemies, do some spin moves into this missile launcher, beat the manager, and head into the Phineas and Barnaby wrestling match. A side effect of the Food Frenzy glitch is that I believe it cancels the startup of Food Frenzy in this fight, which on its own makes the glitch not worth using. I ended up being able to run into the corner to pull it off though, and you can see just how quickly this shreds through the wrestler's HP bar. I ended up resorting to just using spin moves on the second wrestler, and after defeating this marks the end of the casino level. During the cutscene, as you could have guessed, Peter gets knocked in the head once again and returns to his normal self. He sees a Mr. Belvedere head flying in the sky and follows it to the docks. Meanwhile, Brian has finally made his way to the dog track and needs to get further inside to where they're holding the racing dogs. Per usual, I'll switch into Stewie and fly around collecting all of the ticket stubs while avoiding detection. Never really bothered practicing this section because I assumed I'd just get better at it from continually doing runs. But I was not expecting to get on a run like this after only 3 days of attempts, so unfortunately, it wasn't as polished as I'd have liked it to be. Once I arrive in the room Adam West is in, I need to be very careful to not only avoid detection, but grab this ticket stub by the very edge of Stewie's hitbox to avoid a lengthy cutaway gag. Thankfully, I did manage to pull this off. I swear it's so much more difficult than it looks. Once I finish the next room, we'll mark the end of this section of the dog race area. Afterwards, we'll be back at Bertram's lair as Stewie. After clearing out the enemies, I'll jump onto this lift, walk off of it and press this button, and then quickly jump back onto the lift as it raises, skipping half the puzzle for this area. Then all I have to do is fly into this force field to damage abuse and skip the rest of it. I'll need to take out these turrets and enemies to open the door, which is easy enough because if I shoot the turrets right in the barrel, they'll explode in one shot. Next up will be a sliding section auto-scroller, and I just need to traverse through while avoiding the toxic waste and collecting health pickups, pretty easy overall. Then I'll have to get through this conveyor belt section of traps to get deeper into the lair. Let's see how that goes. News to me! Now listen, for some reason every other time I jumped off that blade, it worked out great, but for some reason I literally could not jump off of it and I died. Anyways, once I get to these presses, I can jump onto the nearby one and use it to skip the whole segment, which is one of the first skips I ever found in this game. In the next part, I'll make my way through until I reach these elevator platforms. If I do a combination of a bunch of glides and double jumps, I'll be close enough to the wall that I can do a double jump and clip through the ceiling to the next segment. After finishing this section, we'll now be in the heart of Bertram's lair. It turns out Bertram was also planning on controlling the minds of the entire world by blasting a satellite into space, and he even has Rupert trapped inside of it. To stop Bertram and save Rupert, I'll have to blow up the satellite, which of course I have a pretty cool quick shot for that Toxic showed me.
Heavens, those blast doors only leave a small hole for fireproof. Those balls of cat.
That is the Toxic.
I know, up to 10 there to go, and I'm every bar slut he's ever promised.
Now that's Toxic.
Beautiful. After destroying the satellite and rescuing Rupert, Bertram challenges Stewie to a one-on-one battle on the playground to settle their differences. Meanwhile, Peter has finally made his way to the docks, but out of nowhere, some of the scraps launched from the destroyed satellite land straight on him, giving him another head injury. This time he arises from the scrap metal as a robot ninja, and carries on to find Mr. Belvedere. But for the first time in this run, I'm not going to play this level as Peter, and will instead use a character swap glitch to play as Stewie instead. It is technically faster to speedrun this level with Peter, but it is really difficult and requires a bunch of different wall clips. I especially wasn't confident enough with the wall clip by the seals, so I opted for using Stewie instead to traverse through the level from out of bounds. Playing through this level as Stewie is really weird because the camera follows Stewie from behind when it's supposed to be locked in place. I'll first walk next to the trash can to load some of the level, and then fly around out of bounds to avoid all of the enemies. To get through this gate towards the end, all of these seals need to be defeated because there is a giant invisible wall surrounding the gate, which is really difficult to get past. So I just hop on this rock where you're normally not able to stand, and the seals will jump off the pier, allowing me to continue. This next part is really simple. I have to collect the beers that are falling down, which is pretty funny to do with Stewie, and in some ways a lot easier due to his faster movement speed and ability to hover. But he does have a smaller hitbox, which can make it difficult to pick up some of the beer, so I want to stay perfectly centered to avoid missing any of them. If I do happen to miss a beer, not only do I fail the challenge, but I'll end up soft locking the game, so it's really important that I don't miss a single one. Next we'll be back at the dog tracks with Brian near the concession stands. For this level, we used to play it as Brian for a long time, but it was finally decided that Stewie was faster, eliminating Brian out of the run entirely. But to do this quickly as Stewie requires some precision to not get caught by the police and breach the cycles on time. You can see in my first attempt, I do get caught by the police, which is quite unfortunate because on my second attempt, I don't get caught, despite it barely looking any different than the first. I'll need to walk into the concessions area to pick up a food carrier, since that's what you're supposed to do as Brian. This puts me on a perfect cycle to avoid the greased up deaf guy. The most optimal way to do this level is to reach the final ticket stub without the police officer catching you. But since I already got caught once, I didn't want to risk losing any more time and opted for waiting for him to turn his back to continue. In the next part of this level, I have to fulfill the orders of the people in the stands, which of course is much faster as Stewie, since we can fly around, which ends up making this slightly faster than playing as Brian, despite having to waste time performing the character swap glitch. After this challenge, Brian finally matches the sound of the culprit, so now he needs to devise a plan to lure them out. He decides that if he wins the dog race, maybe the culprit will be revealed. To win the race, Brian will drug all of the other competitors. Per usual, I'll character swap as Stewie and begin going to each of the dog bowls, putting poison in each of them. Again, it's so easy to fail these missions as Stewie because you have to move so precisely and on cycle. In this case, I jumped towards this dog bowl, but I missed jumping on the table before it, and didn't have the height to avoid detection. I didn't realize how important this was, but I couldn't really go back and jump on the table anyways, because even that would be enough to throw me off cycle. On my second attempt, I ended up overcompensating and flew too high over the bowl, avoiding hit detection once again, which also threw me off cycle. Thankfully, third time's the charm, now onto the race. Since all of the dogs are poisoned, even as Brian we'd have no issue getting first place. But it is pretty funny that we still get to play as Stewie for the section. Upon winning the race, it completes the final objective of Brian's storyline. Just before getting arrested, Brian officially reveals who the culprit is. Can you guess? No? You can't? Yeah, it's, Quagmire. None of the characters are really shocked by this, I guess, and they just mix a joke in afterwards, and that's it for the Brian arc. Flipping back over to Peter, we're still at the docks, but this time we will actually be playing as Peter. I'll continue running on the docks until I reach the beach. But instead of running on the beach, I'll push this guy selling hot dogs into the water and jump onto the rocks in the background to get out of bounds. Yeah, I guess there was an oversight here on where the boundary for falling into the water and keeping Peter off the rocks connects, so if anything, I don't know if we could even consider this a glitch. Anyways, I'll cruise past the entire beach section out of bounds, which used to be one of the more deadly sections of the run. Once I get to the end, I want to collect some snack meter and then head into this cave. Upon entering, we'll be stopped by Seamus, who finally wants to put an end to Peter's tyranny. You know, because at this point, we've probably killed over 100 people in Quahog. He brings in the Black Knight for a boss battle. This fight is pretty easy though, and he's taken out with a simple food frenzy. I tried beating him while standing towards the bottom of the screen, because for some reason this skips a cutaway gag after the fight, but he wasn't having any of that. So I redirected the food frenzy, and finished him while still having to do the cutaway, losing a bit of time. The nice helmet lands on Peter's head, returning him back to normal, just as Lois catches up with him. She reprimands him for hunting down Mr. Belvedere, because obviously he isn't even a real person, and the person who plays the character on the show has already been dead for several years. Peter feels awful about what he did to all the people he harmed. Lois recommends maybe apologizing and making amends with all the people he's wronged, which is really just a different way of telling him to go drown his hours with booze, so he heads to the Drunken Clam. Flipping back over to Stewie, we'll first be fighting Bertram at the basketball court. Bertram will make a bunch of clones of himself, which are easily taken out with a penetrating shot. I want to try to shoot the clone in the back left last, as the last clone will always be the real Bertram, and this will shorten the distance it takes for him to walk back into position. After doing this for a couple waves, we'll leave Bertram on the ground crying. Stewie makes fun of him, calling him a big baby. So then, of course, he literally turned into a big baby, moving our fight to the playground. I'll need to keep shooting Bertram's feet until he starts tripping, and then climb up the playground equipment to shoot his head. I want to shoot his feet from the left side, That way the bullets from the penetrating shot will hit both feet at the same time, doing double damage. I can also use the double jump to clip through some of the platforms to avoid having to grapple up top. After doing 3 shots, some of the equipment will get destroyed, forcing me to shoot from the right side instead. In my run, I go around here using the same strats you'd see in a casual playthrough, but apparently you can also clip through the first platform and use that height to fly around a different way, which is pretty cool. After doing 3 shots, we'll lead to the third phase of the boss fight at the sandbox. By standing on the right side of the area will position me slightly closer to the sandbox, making the camera transition slightly quicker. The sandbox is pretty much the same deal as the other 2 phases, but even easier. By standing right by Bertram's shadow allows me to avoid the wave from his stomp attack. Also, this time we don't have to glide around the level at all, and just have to shoot his gun after he falls over. After the 3rd shot is fired, we'll finish the boss fight and conclude the Stewie section of the video game. During the cutscene, just before Stewie finishes him off, Bertram pulls out the ultimate trap card. He calls for his mommy, leaving them to conclude this for another day. Flipping back over to Peter once more, he's now with the drunken clam, venting to Horace the bartender. After taking a sip of his beer, he takes another glance at Horace, only to notice he's actually Belvedere, which is actually just the evil chicken in disguise, leading to a classic evil chicken fight as the final battle. But instead of fighting the evil chicken, I'll instead use a character swap glitch to switch to Stewie. Stewie completely breaks the chicken fight for several reasons. The first reason is, the chicken doesn't even spawn in with Stewie there. But if he doesn't spawn in, then how do you even progress? Well, weirdly enough, the developers left a dev exit in each section of the chicken fight, and with Stewie's mobility, it's pretty easy to get out of bounds to reach them. The only thing is the camera position makes the controls feel kinda like they're inverted, but once I got used to it, I started getting pretty decent at moving with the wonky controls. After reaching the cargo plane, I'll load my autosave to load back in as Peter, and continue the fight normally from here. It is possible to continue abusing dev exits all the way to the final fight, but clipping out of bounds and moving in the cargo plane is exceptionally difficult. I have no idea how Toxic does this first try in his PB, but he makes it look so easy, it literally blows my mind. Anyways, back to my run. Once I switch to Peter, I'll begin using the head bash combo as it's really fast and does a lot of damage to the chicken. Once the chicken is knocked down, I'll do a spin move to finish him off, proceeding to the following area. Each time I enter a new location, I'll reload my save file, as apparently this makes it so the chicken doesn't fly up into the air during the fight and saves a bit of time. Once I got to the final area, I began doing my normal combos until the chicken got knocked down. The second I noticed he was knocked down, I inputted for the spin move, but didn't realize it would finish the leg sweep combo instead, and this gave the chicken enough time to stand back up before I could finish him off. This was kind of unfortunate, but then once he landed, I dealt with him quickly. Here's how the run ended up finishing, plus the final cutscene.
Let's finish this bitch off. There it is. There it is. There it is, guys. We'll take it. I'll take that all day. Every day of the week. I'll take it.
Oh, crap.
Oh my God, Peter, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, Lois. In fact, I learned something today. You can't always trust your feelings. Especially after watching 5 straight days of Mr. Belvedere with no sleep, and while constantly getting hit in the head by a very coincidentally large number of objects.
Well, I learned that the dog track is horse racing for poor people.
And I learned that I've got to stop overscheduling myself. I mean, look at this. Booked solid through next Thursday.
You know, there's just one thing I don't get. I know I was out of my mind in every way, but I swear that Mr. Belvedere head floating up in the sky was real. Hey, there it is again! What the hell is that?
Oh, you're a hoot, Mr. Belvedere. Okay, now here's my screech.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. After 4 days of practice and 3 days of runs, I managed to improve my old PB by over 30 minutes and managed to achieve what I always believed to be impossible. Oh, I also ended up beating Liquid Wi-Fi's run too. Huge shoutouts to everyone in the Family Guy community, notably Megatoner, Chloe, and Toxic, for making this speedrun what it is today, and also for helping coach me to get to the level I got to in such a short period of time. Last month, Toxic managed to incorporate all of the most difficult strats in this game into a run and got an insane time of 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 12 seconds. literally only a minute and 12 seconds off his some of best segments, which is about as close to perfect as you can get. Anyways guys, that's all I have for today's video. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, as that's the best way to show support. Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check out my link in the description to get 20% off all their products, plus free shipping. Also be sure to follow me on Twitch and subscribe to my YouTube to catch my live streams and future videos that come out. That's all I have to say for today, so as always, I hope you all have a beautiful life.